My wife's boss laughed condescendingly at me, and my wife decided to play along by making me look like a simpleton. I did not tolerate it, said what I thought, and left. But let me tell you how we got to this situation. My name is Tom, and I've been married to my wife Sarah for the past 12 years. It's been quite the roller coaster ride over the course of our marriage, with plenty of ups and downs, but things really came to a head at a particularly fancy cocktail party we attended last month. It all started a few weeks prior when Sarah's boss, the illustrious Mr. Big Shot, extended an invitation to us to attend an exclusive soiree at his sprawling mansion. Sarah was absolutely thrilled at the prospect. Any opportunity for her to get dolled up to the nines and rub elbows with the high society elite was right up her alley. Me, on the other hand, I'm a much more simple fellow who much prefers quiet evenings at home on the couch, idly channel surfing and sipping a nice glass of whiskey. But I knew this party was of the utmost importance to Sarah, so despite my reservations I begrudgingly agreed to go along, if only to keep the peace in our household. The night of the big event finally arrived, and Sarah spent what felt like an eternity getting herself ready, meticulously primping and preening, perfectly coiffing her hair and meticulously applying her makeup, all while trying on no less than a dozen different designer dresses before finally settling on the most ostentatious one. I, on the other hand, simply threw on a relatively decent suit and tie combo and called it a day. When Sarah finally emerged from the bathroom looking absolutely stunning, I'll admit my heart skipped a beat or two, but the moment was short-lived. "Really, Tom, that's the best you could do?" she scoffed, eyeing my outfit with open disdain. I let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through my slightly disheveled hair. "Sarah, you look beautiful. Can we just go and get this over with?" She pursed her lips but didn't say anything further. We then climbed into our car and made the short drive over to Mr. Big Shot's palatial estate. The mansion was absolutely massive, with elaborately manicured gardens, and a seemingly endless driveway lined with the sort of expensive sports cars that only the truly wealthy could afford. As we approached the grand front entrance, I could feel my anxiety steadily rising. I've just never been all that comfortable in these sorts of high society settings. When we walked through the doors, the party was already in full swing. The room was absolutely packed to the brim with well-heeled men and women, all sipping on glasses of bubbly champagne and laughing boisterously. I immediately felt horribly out of place in my slightly rumpled suit, like a sore thumb amidst all the perfectly coiffed and tailored attendees. Sarah, on the other hand, was in her absolute element. She immediately spotted Mr. Big Shot, and without a moment's hesitation dragged me over to him. "Gordon, darling, there you are," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around the portly balding man in a grandiose display of affection. "I'm so glad you could make it." Mr. Big Shot eyed me up and down, a slight smirk playing on his thin lips. "Ah yes, Tom, good to see you." I gave the man a tight-lipped smile and shook his hand, trying my best to exude an air of polite interest. "Thanks for having us." For the next hour or so, Sarah flitted about the room, introducing me to all of her co-workers and their equally well-heeled and haughty spouses. I dutifully followed along, making small talk and doing my best to appear interested in the vapid conversations, but the truth was I was utterly bored out of my mind. At one point Sarah dragged me over to her on their champagne. "Oh girls, you have to meet my husband Tom," Sarah said, practically shoving me right into the middle of the group. The women all turned to look at me, their perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised in barely concealed disdain. "Ah yes, Tom. Sarah told us all about you," one of the women said, her voice dripping with condescension. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "Nice to meet you all," I mumbled, staring down at my shoes. Sarah shot me a love that clearly said, "Behave yourself, Tom." I tried my best to engage in the conversation, but it quickly became painfully obvious that I had absolutely nothing in common with these women. They prattled on endlessly about their lavish vacations, their designer handbags, and their children's elite private school experiences. I couldn't even begin to relate. Eventually I made my way over to the bar, desperately in need of a drink to help numb the boredom. As I nursed my whiskey, I watched Sarah holding court with her co-workers, laughing and gesticulating wildly. She seemed to be having the time of her life. I, on the other hand, felt completely and totally out of place. I didn't belong here, and it was painfully obvious to everyone around me. I couldn't wait to just go home and collapse on the couch in my most comfortable sweatpants. As the night wore on, Sarah only seemed to get drunker and more boisterous. At one point I caught her whispering something into Mr. Big Shot's ear, her hand resting lightly on his arm. I felt a pang of jealousy, but I quickly shook it off. Surely Sarah wouldn't do anything to jeopardize our marriage, would she? Finally, as the party was winding down, Sarah made her way over to where I was standing in the corner nursing my 5th or 6th whiskey. "There you are, darling," she exclaimed, her words slightly slurred. "I've been looking all over for you." I eyed her warily. "I've been right here the whole time." She let out a high-pitched grating laugh that made my head throb. "Well, come on then, let's say our goodbyes and get out of here." As we made our way towards the door, Sarah suddenly spotted Mr. Bigshot, and to my horror she grabbed me by the arm and dragged me over to him. "Mr. Bigshot, I just wanted to thank you for a lovely evening," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Tom and I had a wonderful time." Mr. Bigshot turned to me, his beady eyes narrowed. "Yes, I'm sure you did, my dear," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I felt my hackles rise. "Actually, I didn't have that great of a time," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "This isn't really my scene." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and she quickly tried to cover for me. "Oh Tom, don't be ridiculous. You know how much you enjoy these sorts of events." But the damage was done. Mr. Bigshot's lips curled into a sneer. "Well, it seems your husband isn't quite as enthusiastic about our little story as you are, my dear," he said, his gaze cutting into me. Sarah shot me a withering look. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Bigshot. Tom is just—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Well, he can be a bit of a killjoy sometimes." I felt my face flush with a mix of embarrassment and white-hot anger. How dare she humiliate me like this in front of all these people? I'd had enough. "You know what, Sarah? I'm done," I said, my voice low and terse. "I'm done with this party, and I'm done with you constantly trying to make me feel like I don't measure up." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "What are you talking about, Tom?" "I'm saying that I'm leaving. Both this party and you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm tired of feeling like I'm always disappointing you." "Well, consider yourself no longer disappointed." With that, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the mansion, ignoring Sarah's frantic calls behind me. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. As I drove home, my mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions. Had I really just done that? Had I really just walked out on my wife and our entire social circle? I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that I no longer had to endure those vapid conversations and funny smiles, but dread at the very real consequences that my actions might have on my marriage. When I got home, I immediately poured myself a generous glass of whiskey and sank down onto the couch. I sat there, staring into the amber liquid, trying to make sense of what had just happened. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the front door open and close. I knew it was Sarah, undoubtedly coming to lecture me on my unacceptable behavior. Sure enough, she came storming into the living room, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. "What the hell was that, Tom?" she demanded, her voice shrill. I sighed, taking a sip of my drink. "You know exactly what that was, Sarah. I'm tired of constantly feeling like I'm not good enough for you and your high society friends." She scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Oh, come on, Tom. Don't be so dramatic. You're my husband and I love you. But sometimes you just need to suck it up and play the part, you know?" I shook my head. "No, I don't know. I'm not some performing monkey, Sarah. I'm a person with my own thoughts and feelings, and I'm tired of you trying to mold me into someone I'm not." Sarah's lips thinned into a tight line. "Well, if you can't even be bothered to put in a little effort for me, then maybe we shouldn't even be together." I felt my heart sink like a stone. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" She threw up her hands in frustration. "I don't know, Tom. I need some time to think, okay?" With that, she turned and stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my whiskey. I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying the events of the evening over and over in my mind. Had I really just ruined everything? Was my marriage to Sarah really over? Eventually, I decided I needed to get out of the house. I grabbed my car keys and headed to the local bar, desperate for some human interaction that didn't involve judgment or condescension. As I walked through the door, the familiar smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hit me, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. This was my element, not those stuffy cocktail parties. I sidled up to the bar and ordered a double whiskey. Neat. The bartender, a grizzled old man with a weathered face, eyed me curiously. Rough night, buddy, he asked, setting the drink down in front of me. I sighed, taking a long, much-needed sip. You have no idea. For the next couple of hours I sat at the bar, nursing my drinks and pouring my heart out to the bartender. I told him all about Sarah's constant need to impress her coworkers, her disdain for my more humble tastes, and my ultimate outburst at the party. Sounds like you've got a real piece of work on your hands, the bartender said, shaking his head. I nodded glumly. You're telling me I just don't know what to do. I love Sarah, but I can't keep living like this. The bartender let out a low whistle. Well, my friend, it sounds like you've got some tough decisions to make. But let me tell you, if you're not happy, it ain't worth sticking around. Life's too short, spend it with someone who makes you miserable. I considered his words, taking another sip of my drink. He was right. I couldn't keep going on like this. Something had to change. As I drove home later that night, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living in Sarah's shadow, constantly trying to be someone I'm not. It was time to take a stand and be true to myself, even if it meant risking my marriage. When I walked through the front door, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of anger and sadness. Tom, we need to talk, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, taking a seat next to her. I know, and I have something I need to say. Sarah looked at me expectantly, her fingers fidgeting nervously with the hem of her dress. Sarah, I love you. I really do, I began, my voice steady and even. But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep trying to be someone I'm not just to make you and your friends happy. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, let me finish, I said firmly. I'm tired of feeling like I'm always disappointing you. I'm tired of feeling like I don't measure up. I'm tired of constantly having to put on a fake persona just to get through these social events. Sarah's eyes welled with tears, but I pressed on. I know how important your job and your social standing are to you, but they're just not that important to me. And I'm not going to sacrifice my own happiness to make you happy. Sarah sniffed, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. So what are you saying, Tom? Are you leaving me? I sighed, reaching out to take her hand in mine. No, Sarah, I'm not leaving you. But I need you to understand that I'm not going to change who I am just to fit into your world. If you can't accept me for who I am, then maybe we shouldn't be together. She was silent for a long moment, her fingers tightening around mine. I don't know what to say, Tom. I guess I never realized how much this was bothering you. Well, now you know, I said simply. So what do you want to do? Sarah looked down at our entwined hands, her brow furrowed in deep thought. I need some time to think, Tom. This is a lot to process. I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. Take all the time you need, Sarah. I'm not going anywhere. With that, I stood up and headed to the kitchen, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. I knew this was a pivotal moment in our relationship. And I couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation about what the future might hold. Over the next few days, Sarah and I barely spoke. She spent most of her time holed up in our bedroom, and I tried my best to give her the space she needed to sort through her feelings. I, on the other hand, busied myself with work and tried to keep my mind occupied, lest I start obsessing over the uncertain fate of our marriage. Finally, on the fourth day, Sarah emerged from the bedroom, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. Tom, we need to talk, she said, her voice steady and unwavering. I nodded, gesturing for her to have a seat on the couch. Okay, I'm listening. She took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting nervously. I have been doing a lot of thinking about us and our marriage, and I've realized that you're right. I've been putting too much emphasis on my job and my social standing, and not enough on you and our relationship. I felt a small spark of hope flare up in my chest. Go on. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry for always trying to mold you into someone you're not. I'm sorry for constantly making you feel like you're not good enough. She paused, her eyes glistening with tears. The truth is, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I don't want to lose you no matter what. I reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle, reassuring squeeze. I don't want to lose you either, Sarah. But I need you to understand that I'm not going to change who I am, just to make you and your friends happy. She nodded, wiping her eyes with her free hand. I know, Tom. I'm going to try my best to be more accepting of the things that are important to you, even if they're not the same things that are important to me. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, like a heavy burden had been lifted. That's all I ask, Sarah. I just want you to love me for who I am, not who you want me to be. She smiled, leaning in to press a soft, tender kiss to my lips. I do love you, Tom. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this work. From that day on, things began to change between Sarah and me. She made a concerted effort to be more understanding and accepting of my needs and desires, and I, in turn, tried my best to be more engaged and involved in the social aspects of her life. We still had our disagreements, of course, but we worked through them with open and honest communication, each of us striving to see the other's perspective. In the weeks that followed, Sarah made a genuine effort to be more accepting of the things that were important to me. She stopped pressuring me to attend her high society events, and instead started asking my opinion on what we should do on the weekends. Sometimes that meant going out for a nice dinner, but other times it meant staying in and having a quiet night at home. I appreciated her willingness to compromise. In turn, I tried to be more engaged in the social aspects of her life. I accompanied her to a few work functions, but I made it clear that I wouldn't be putting on an act or pretending to be someone I'm not. Sarah seemed to understand and didn't push me beyond my comfort zone. One weekend, she surprised me by suggesting we host a small gathering at our place, something a bit more casual and low-key to the lavish parties I was used to. I was skeptical at first, but when I saw the guest list consisted mainly of her closest friends and family, I agreed. The night of the party, I have to admit I was a bit nervous, but Sarah's thoughtfulness in curating the guest list put me at ease. These were people who cared about her and by extension cared about me as well. As the evening progressed, I found myself actually enjoying the conversation and company. There were no judgmental glances or condescending remarks, just genuine warmth and camaraderie. At one point, I even found myself in a lively debate with Sarah's cousin, a fellow history buff, about the merits of various presidential administrations. It was the kind of stimulating intellectual exchange I craved, and I was grateful to have the opportunity to engage in it without feeling out of place. When the party wound down and the last guest had departed, Sarah and I found ourselves alone in the living room, sipping glasses of wine. She reached over and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Thank you for giving this a chance, Tom," she said softly. "I know it wasn't easy for you, but I really appreciate you making the effort." I squeezed her hand back and smiled. "I'm glad I did, it was actually kind of nice." Sarah's face lit up with a radiant smile. "I'm so glad to hear that, and I promise no more of those stuffy high society events unless you're genuinely interested in going." I chuckled and pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her. "And holding you to that, you know." We sat there in contented silence for a few moments, simply enjoying each other's company. It was in that moment that I realized how much progress we'd made in our relationship. We had weathered a significant storm, and come out the other side stronger and more understanding of each other. Over time, I even found myself enjoying some of the parties and events that Sarah would drag me to. I still very much preferred the quiet comfort of our home, and the simple pleasures of an evening spent in front of the TV. But I realized that being true to myself didn't mean I had to completely shut out her world. It just meant finding a balance that worked for both of us. And as for Sarah's high society friends, well, they eventually came around. They realized that I might not be the perfectly coiffed, well-spoken husband they had expected, but I was a good man who loved their friend deeply. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. Looking back, I realized that the night of that fateful party was a true turning point in our relationship. It was the moment when I finally stood up for myself and refused to be the person that Sarah wanted me to be. And in the end, it brought us closer together and made our marriage stronger than ever before. So, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes the most important thing you can do is be true to yourself, even if it means rocking the boat a little. Because at the end of the day, the only opinion that really matters is the one that comes from the person who knows you best, your partner. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and I continued to work on our marriage, each of us making a concerted effort to understand and appreciate the other. There were still occasional bumps in the road, moments where our differing priorities and perspectives would clash, but we navigated them with patience, empathy, and a renewed commitment to our love. One afternoon, as we sat together on the patio, sipping iced tea and watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sarah reached out and took my hand in hers. "Tom," she said softly, her eyes shining with sincerity, "I want you to know how much I appreciate you. I know I haven't always been the easiest person to live with, and I'm sorry for that. But you're the rock that keeps me grounded. Without you, I don't know where I'd be." I felt my heart swell with emotion as I squeezed her hand gently. "Sarah, you're the other half of my heart. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." She smiled, her lips quirking up in that way that always made my pulse quicken. "I love you, Tom. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." In that moment, as the warm breeze ruffled our hair and the cicadas sang their evening chorus, I knew that everything was going to be all right. We had weathered the storm, and our love had only grown stronger for it. As the months passed, we continued to navigate the ups and downs of our marriage, each of us learning and growing in our own way. Sarah became more mindful of her tendency to get caught up in the trappings of status and success, and I, in turn, made an effort to be more engaged and present in the social aspects of her life. One day, as we were hosting a small dinner party for some of Sarah's colleagues, I found myself actually enjoying the conversation. I listened intently as they discussed their latest work projects, and even offered a few insights of my own. To my surprise, they seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Afterwards, as Sarah and I were clearing the table, she turned to me with a proud smile. "You know, Tom, I think you really impressed my friends tonight. They were saying how refreshing it was to talk to someone who isn't just all about status and appearances." I felt a warmth spread through my chest. "Well, I suppose I'm finally getting the hang of this whole high society thing," I teased, bumping her shoulder playfully. She laughed, the sound music to my ears. "I'm just glad you're giving it a chance. I know it's not always easy for you, but it means the world to me that you're trying." I pulled her into a tight embrace, savoring the familiar comfort of her in my arms. "I'd do anything for you, Sarah, you know that." As the years passed, our relationship only continued to grow stronger. We weathered the ups and downs of life together, supporting each other through career changes, health scares, and the arrival of our first child. And through it all, we never lost sight of the deep, abiding love that had brought us together in the first place. One particularly memorable evening, as we sat together on the porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in the dusky twilight, Sarah turned to me with a wistful smile. "You know, Tom, I think about that night at Mr. Bigshot's party all the time. It was such a pivotal moment for us, wasn't it?" I nodded, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "It was. I'm so grateful that we were able to get through that and come out the other side stronger than ever." She leaned into my touch, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Me too. I don't know what I'd do without you, Tom. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I felt my heart swell with emotion, and I pulled her close, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. "And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Sarah. I love you now and forever." In that moment, as we sat there together, basking in the glow of our hard-won happiness, I knew that we had something truly special. Our relationship had been tested, but it had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. And as long as we had each other, I knew that we could weather any storm that life might throw our way. The years continued to pass, and our lives became a whirlwind of activity as we navigated the challenges of raising a family. There were times when the stress and demands of everyday life threatened to overwhelm us, but we always found our way back to each other, drawing strength and support from the unbreakable bond we have forged. And then one day, as I stood beside Sarah's hospital bed, holding her hand as she took her last rattling breath, I realized just how precious and fleeting our time together had been. All the petty disagreements, the social obligations, the moments of frustration, it all faded into insignificance in the face of the overwhelming love and gratitude I felt for the woman who had been my constant companion for so many years. As I made the lonely drive home, my heart heavy with grief, I couldn't help but reflect on all the moments we had shared, the laughter, the tears, the triumphs, and the setbacks. And through it all, I knew that our love had been the thread that had held us together, the anchor that had kept us grounded, even in the midst of the storm. In the days and weeks that followed, I found solace in the memories we had created, the life we had built together. I cherished the little things, the way she used to hum softly as she cooked, the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her embrace, and I knew that even though she was gone, a part of her would always live on in my heart. As I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of our home, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. Yes, our journey had not always been an easy one, but had been a journey worth taking. Because in the end, what mattered most was not the grand parties or the social status, but the deep abiding love that we had shared. And so, as I looked forward to the rest of my life, I knew that I would carry that love with me, a beacon to guide me through the darkness and the light. Because Sarah had not just been my wife, she had been my soulmate, my partner, my everything. And though she was gone, her memory would continue to inspire and sustain me until the very end.